Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. Alright, so in this video, we are going to be solving exercise 3.3, right, which is the step 3 of the phone book backend. In the previous videos, we solved exercise 3.1 and 3.2, right? Okay, so this exercise says implement the functionality for displaying the information for a single phone book entry. The URL for getting the data for a person with the ID 5 should be something like this. So when we pass something like this into the client service, such as the browser, it should return the data for just one person with this ID, not the entire data that we have like this. If the ID is 1, it should return just this data. If the ID is 2, it should return just this data, and likewise for the rest of them. It also says that if an entry for the given ID is not found, the server should respond with the appropriate status code. All right, so let's head into the code implementation to see how this can be done. All right, so as we can see, I have the setup folder for this exercise. So I'm simply going to be copying the parts here and then cding into it. So let's close this server. Let's cd into step 3. Let's use the npm run dev, and also let's close these files because these files belong to the previous exercise. So what we can do here is let's open the file for step 3. Let's be sure that this code still works at this point. So let's go to this part. Let's refresh. This works. Let's come to this /info, which is this /info. Let's refresh and see if it works as well. It works. So we can see here that the time changed, right, when we refresh this. All right. So in the previous video, I mentioned that I was going to show us how to use the REST client, right? So I have already installed the REST client already. I'm not going to be showing us how to do that because everything already is in the material, right? I'm just going to show us how to use it here. All right, so to use it, we are going to create a new file in this setup folder, and we call it anything, but it must end with a .rest format. So we can just do something like this, new file, and then let's call it get.rest, and we click on enter. All right, here, let's see if this works. So we can see here that we have this. Okay, so we worked with an endpoint in the exercise 3.1 and 3.2. Let's test this endpoint. This endpoint here, right, which is the same endpoint we have in the browser here. So we can just copy this endpoint. Let's paste it here. Then let's save. So here we can see that this is the endpoint, right? And we have a send request link here that has been created for us, right? So let's click on this send request. We can see here that this gives us exactly the data that was returned in our browser, right? So this is what we have. So we necessarily don't need to use a browser anymore. We can just use REST clients to solve everything we want to work. Also, to add more endpoints, to test for more endpoints, we can use this to permit us to use or to test more endpoints in the same file. We can see here that this file is get.rest, right? So let's see how it was done in the material. Let's come to this part. Okay, the Visual Studio Code REST client. There was a part here that it was used. Let's just scroll down. Okay, yes, here. So here, if you want to post anything, we are not doing that yet, but when we get to that part where we are going to be using post, we can just come here and then see the way it is done here, right? So going back to the instruction, let's see let's see what the instruction says in 3.3. Okay, all right. So this is this. And then I just said I should show us that, okay, that instead of using the browser, we could use a REST client service to also display or render data, right? Just as the way it's been done on the browser. Okay, so at this point here, we simply just go to the code implementation for this exercise itself, right? Now, going to the instruction, it says implement the functionality for displaying the information for a single phone book entry. Now, let's do that. To get for a single phone book entry, we say app.get. It's a get request, right? And then we say slash API, just as it is here. We put exactly what it is here, then add something new. We say slash persons. Now we say slash colon ID. Now this is going to represent the query parameter, right, for each of the data in this persons, right? So this colon ID, it represents the ID of each of these data here. So we know that we are going to use the callback. So we do rec comma res. Then here, what we can do next is this. Um, we want to target this ID first. How do we target this ID? This ID here is a query param, right? So we simply just say rec.params.id. Here it's .id because ID is the name that is passed into this place here, right? So we assign this to a variable name. Let's call it const. You can just call it const ID, something like this. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to be sure that the ID we pass in the endpoint, it tallies with the ID of that person in the data. What that means is that if we use something like this, when we copy this and then we go to our REST client and we paste this here, this is going to target anybody with the ID of 5, right, in the database, which in this case we have as persons. And if we cannot find any, we are expected to return something to the user telling the person that such ID is not available, right? All right, so we are trying to target this ID using the rec.params.id. After targeting that, we need to iterate through the data we have and check if the ID that we passed here corresponds to the ID of any of the data we have here, right? So what we can do is we say persons, which is the array we have here, dot, we use a find, and then we search through, right? Now find is going to accept a parameter called person, right? Because here this is arrow function. Then we say person, which is this person now. This person now is represent each of this data in the iteration, right? So here we say person dot id triple equals, right, triple equals id. Now what this means is this: the person dot id here, which means this id 1, 2, 3, and 4, we want to check if any one of them tallies with the id that we passed in the REST client here, which is represented with this colon id, right? And if we find any, something should happen. So what we can do is we are going to assign this to a variable name. We say const person, right? Then we save this. So if this works, we want to send this person, which is the person that has the ID that corresponds with that of the REST client. We want to send it to the front end for the user to see. So we say rest dot send person, not persons now, person. Now let's save this. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be inside this app.get. So let's take it up. Yes. All right, so let's come here. Let's save this. Let's click on send request. Okay, this is saying okay. It's not supposed to be okay because we don't have any ID with 5. Let's try 3. Let's send the request. This is still saying okay, which we all know is not true, right? All right, so let's fix this. Let's fix this. So here we understand that um if you look at this part very well, the ID here in some due to some things, right? The ID here does not come as a number, right? Doesn't come as a number, it comes as a string. So what we can do is we are going to wrap this, right? We are going to convert this entire ID that is coming as a string, we convert it to a number, right? Okay, so let's try something. Let's do console. Let's console log the ID we have here. Let's say type of ID. Let's see if this ID is truly a string or a number. Let's come here to the REST client. Let's click on send request. So here we can see that in the terminal, it is giving us a string, right? So that means that this can never return any of this data because this data, the data we have here, the ID we have here, they are all numbers. So what we can do is we simply just cast this, right? So we change this string into a number. So we simply just come here and say number. Let's save this. Now let's go to let's go to the REST client again and see. Let's click on the send request. Now we can see we have a number now. Now we can see that this matches properly. We have ID, name, and number because it was able to get these 3 here, which corresponds to the data we have here with an ID of 3. That's Dan Abramov, right? Okay, so I don't think this is the end of this implementation. Um, let's scroll down. All right, so it says if an entry for the given ID is not found, the server has to respond with the appropriate status code, right? So what this means is when we pass in something like an ID of 5 here, which we saw earlier, when we click on this send request, this is just writing okay, but we know that this is not okay, right? It's supposed to tell us that such is not found and then also give us the status code. Now, the status code is which it is giving us here is 200, which is not correct. So what we are expecting is if it cannot find any data that corresponds with this ID, it should give us the appropriate status code, right? And the appropriate status code in this case should be a 404. 404 simply means not found. So here we want to let's take away this console log because we've been able to successfully get that working. So what we want to do is we want to add 2 more things here, right? 1, the status code, and then 2, to check if the person data is not found with the given ID. So we simply say we use the if statement. We say if person, right? Now this is if the person is found, right? So we want to negate this using the not operator. We say if the person is not found, that's if this is false. Then we say res dot send. Then inside this part, we can just use the template string and say person with ID something like this. Then we use the curly brace to pass the person's ID itself like this, right? And let's say has or is not found. Person with ID this is not found. So let's save this. Let's go to the REST client and then let's click on send request. So it says person with ID 5 is not found, but we are still having 200. Okay, so let's fix this. So what we can do here is we are simply going to um, come here and say rest.status. So this deals with the status code. Here we want to pass in 404 and then we save this. Let's go back to the REST client and then let's click on send request. So here now we can see that it's returning the proper status code now, 404 not found, and it says person with ID 5 is not found, right? So I think we've been able to successfully solve this exercise. Let's keep checking. Let's go to the code exercise, right? Let's check. This if an entry for the given ID is not found, the server has to respond with the appropriate status code. All right. So with this, we've come to the end of this code implementation. We've been able to successfully solve exercise 3.3. All right. See you in the next video. Bye.